Today we're talking about surface area of prisms and cylinders. Before we begin with the surface area, we need to talk about the key parts of a prism, and then we'll talk about lateral area of a prism. So press pause on your video if you need to take a moment and copy these terms down, but I'm just going to briefly go through them. They are terms that we've already been using. It's not that you need to memorize these as much as you need to understand what I am talking about when I use these terms. So let's start by recognizing that the base of a figure are the two figures that are both congruent and parallel. They do not need to be the actual top and bottom of the figure. The figure could be oriented on its side. You might have to visually imagine that you are turning it to identify the bases. But the bases are the two sides that never touch each other, and they are exactly the same. So besides from the bases, you have your base edge. You have your lateral edge. Let's back up. Let's talk about lateral face. Lateral face. It's kind of hard to see where my arrow is pointing, but the lateral faces are the sides of the figure. So a lateral face is not a base. It is the actual sides around the figure. And then we can talk about a lateral edge. And a lateral edge is also called an altitude. If you forgot what an altitude is a perpendicular segment that joins the bases. The height of the figure is the length of the altitude, if it's a right prism. Okay, if we switch and we look at an oblique prism, everything remains the same. You have your bases, you have your base edge, you have your lateral face. Now the one thing that differs is the lateral edge, which is still the edge of the figure, versus the actual altitude, which is the height of the figure. The altitude is the distance between the bottom and the top base, or the distance between the bases. So again, you can press pause, you can copy these terms down, but in general, it is important that you understand what I'm referring to when I use this language. So now let's talk about the lateral area of a prism. So lateral area is something that we use when we are finding the surface area. And the lateral area is the sum of all the areas of the lateral faces. So it's the sum of all the areas around or all the sides of the figure. Now, of course, you could use this formula right here. You could calculate the area of every side and you could add that together and it will give you your answer. But there is a shortcut. We use this formula right here that says the lateral area is equal to the perimeter of the base. So add up your perimeter of either base, one or the other, they're the same thing, and multiply it by the height. So it does not matter to me whether you use the long equation, which is when you find all the areas and add them together, or if you use the shortcut in which you find the perimeter of the base and you multiply it by the height. So let's take a look at the first example. So for the first example, it says find the lateral area of the prism, round to the nearest tenth. Except for we have one problem. We are missing this side length of the triangle. So before we can find the perimeter, we must calculate the missing side length. And this is where we have to use our previous information, our previous knowledge. In this case, I could use the quadratic formula. So my triangle has a side length of 5 and a side length of 6. I'm looking for the hypotenuse. 5 squared plus 6 squared is equal to x squared. This would be 61 is equal to x squared. And when I take the square root of both sides, x is approximately 7.8. Okay, so now to find the lateral area, what you have to do is you have to find first, or identify the perimeter of the base and then multiply it by the height. Now just to clarify, this is a base right here. Okay, I know this figure is oriented different. Imagine if you turned this figure up so it's now sitting on the base. So when we find the lateral area, we're going to use the equation of perimeter times height. The perimeter is the area of the triangle, or the area of the base, which is 5 plus 6 plus what we just calculated at 7.8. And the height of this figure is 7. When I add my perimeter together, I have 18.8 multiplied by 7. And that gives me a lateral area of 131.6 square centimeters. This would be my solution for the lateral area of this triangular prism. So now we're going to move into surface area, which is the major part of today's lesson. But surface area uses lateral area. So the surface area is the sum of all the lateral area and the area of the bases. So it's the area of everything, not just the sides of the figure. It's the bases, it's the sides, it's everything. So there's two different formulas that you could use. You could use the fact that the surface area is equal to the lateral area, which we just learned how to find, plus 2 times the area of the base. Or you could break this up and you could use the equation for lateral area, which is perimeter times height of the lateral sides, plus 2 times the area of the base. All right, notice my description right here does identify what those capital letters stand for. So L stands for lateral area and B stands for base. So in order to find the surface area, I like to break this down into parts. So when I'm doing this, the first thing that I always do is find the area of the base. And I'm going to highlight what I'm using as the base. So I'm using this and this piece as my base of the figure. So the area of this base, using a capital B for area of base, is equal to, we have 9 times 4. I'm going to trace over this base. That means the area of the base is 36 square feet. Okay, next we have the lateral area. The lateral area is found by adding up the perimeter of the base and multiplying it by the height. It's what we just did in the last example. So capital L stands for lateral area. And when I do this, when I add up the perimeter of the base, I have 2 side lengths at 9. I have 2 side lengths at 4. And the height of the figure is 6 feet. When I multiply these together, I have 156 square feet. And now the third step, the last step, is to find the surface area, which is your answer. So the surface area I'm going to use the equation that says surface area is equal to lateral area plus 2 times the base area. And I'm just going to substitute in what I have. So I know that the lateral area is 156, and I know that the surface area is the base area is 36. So I'm going to substitute in 156 plus 2 times 36. And go ahead and notice that I'm using the colors to identify where I did or where I calculated this information. So the surface area is equal to, when you add these numbers together, 228 square feet. Okay, for number 2, I'm going to work a little faster through this one, but we're going to follow the same process. Before we start number 2, we need to recognize that we have 2 bases, which are triangles, but we actually are missing a side length. So I need this length here in order to do the final calculations. So let's do this off to the side real quick. We're going to use the Pythagorean theorem just like we've previously done. 12 squared plus 12 squared is equal to the hypotenuse squared. 288 is equal to x squared. Take the square root of both sides, and x is approximately 17.0. So once we find the missing side, the first step to finding our surface area is to calculate the area of the base. When we calculate the area of the base, we are actually calculating the area of a triangle. So make sure you use the correct formula. 1/2 base times height. So 1/2 times 12 times 12, which gives us the area of the base at 72 millimeters squared. Step 2 is to find the lateral area, and the lateral area is the area of all of the sides. In order to calculate the lateral area, we add the base perimeter. That gives us 12 plus 12 plus 17. And we multiply it by the height of the prism, which is 8. Add this together, and our lateral area is equal to 328 square millimeters. Step 3 is to calculate the surface area. I use the surface area formula of the lateral area plus 2 times the area of the base. The lateral area is 328. The area of the base is 72. When I substitute in my values, I substitute in 328 plus 2 times 72. This gives me the surface area of 472 square millimeters. And that's my final answer. I'd like everyone to take a moment and complete the on your own section by yourself. Come back to the video and check your answers against fine. Next, we're looking at cylinders. Recall that a cylinder has a base of a circle, and the altitude or the axis is the height between the bases. If we're looking at an oblique cylinder, the only difference is that the distance between the base is still called the altitude, However, you need to make sure you clearly identify what that altitude is. So the lateral area of a cylinder is the circumference of the base times the height of the cylinder. So if you look at the geometric net over here of what a cylinder looks like, you are finding the area of this portion. That's what the lateral area is. And you do that by calculating the circumference of the base and you multiply it by the height. So the formula is 2 pi r for circumference times the height. In general, the lateral area of a cylinder is pretty basic because it's the same for every single figure. If we look at our first example, we have a cylinder. It's tipped on its side, but we still know the bases are here. Another key point we need to notice is that this is the diameter that's marked. You can see it indicates this entire line. So I need to indicate that the radius of this is 7.5 millimeters. So in order to calculate the lateral area, I'm going to use 2 times pi times r multiplied by the height. And I'm just going to fill everything in. 2 times pi obviously remains the same, times the radius of 7.5, times the height of the figure, which is 18. The directions do say to round to the nearest tenth. So when I type this expression, 2 times pi times 7.5 times 18 into my calculator, I get approximately 848.23 square millimeters. Now for the surface area of a cylinder, it's very similar to the surface area of a prism, but the surface area is the sum of the lateral area and the areas of the bases. So we're actually going to follow the same exact process that we did the last time. The first step in the last examples and in this example is going to be to find the area of the base. I use this formula that I have highlighted. So the lateral area plus 2 times the area of the base. In this example, the area of the base is found by pi times 13 squared. I'm going to leave this in terms of pi until the last step. That's going to give me the most accurate answer, and that's what you all should do as well. So you leave all of your answers in terms of pi until the absolute last step. So I'm going to write this as 169 times pi yards squared. This is the area of the base. Step 2 is to find the lateral area. And the lateral area is calculated by 2 times pi times the radius, which is 13, times the height of the entire figure, which is 8. Again, I'm going to leave this in terms of pi. When I multiply this together, my lateral area is 208 times pi square yards. And my last step to finding my final answer, which is surface area. I'm using the equation that says the surface area is equal to the lateral area plus 2 times the area of the base. When I fill in my calculated info, I fill in 208 times pi plus 2 times 169 times pi. Type this into my calculator and I round to the nearest tenth based on what the directions say. And my surface area is 1,715.3 square yards. So I did not round my value of pi until that absolute last step, and that's what I suggest all of you do as well. Following the same process for number 2. The difference for number 2 is that number 2 doesn't give you a diagram, it just gives you the information. Within the information, it tells you that the diameter is 6, which means the radius is 3 centimeters. And the height is 4.8. So step 1 is to find the area of the base. The area of the base is going to be calculated by pi times 3 squared. In terms of pi, I'm going to leave this as 9 pi square centimeters. Step 2 is to find the lateral area. The lateral area is equal to 2 times pi times 3 times the height of the figure, which is 4.8. Leaving in terms of pi, this is 28.8 pi square centimeters. And the last part is to find the surface area. Now the surface area is lateral area plus 2 times the area of the base. The lateral area is 28.8 pi plus 2 times 9 pi. Type this into your calculator, round to the nearest tenth. My final answer is 147.0 square centimeters for your final answer. Please try to complete the on your own section by yourself. And this is it for today's notes.